Hi everyone, so today we're going to talk about the blood sugar roller coaster and how this leads to increased inflammation. So we know that eating refined sugars is not good for us. That's not new news. But again, do you understand why that is? Do you understand what's actually happening in your body when you consume too much refined sugar, or when you eat that chocolate bar, when you have a massive pig out and half a pack of biscuits? Do you understand what's actually happening and how that then leads to inflammation? So the blood sugar regulation process is really complicated, and there are a whole load of chemicals involved. It's not just insulin that's working in this. But that's because it's a really important process in our bodies. It's vital to our survival. So all of our cells require energy to function, including our brains. And they are massive glucose guzzlers. They get through a whole load of glucose. It's essential for them to keep going. And they need it's glucose, it's sugar. So sugar itself, important thing I think to take away in some ways, is that sugar itself is not bad. We need sugar, we have to have sugar. Glucose is what fuels our brains. But too much glucose in the bloodstream can cause damage to blood vessels, and in particular to our brains. So, and this can happen in diabetes when it's untreated. If blood sugar levels get too high, it actually causes brain damage, and can cause a coma, and can cause death. Conversely, if our blood sugar drops too low and we don't have any sugar, any glucose in our blood to provide to our brains, again, it will starve of nutrients and it will die. So it's really important for our bodies that we keep in this sort of middle level where there's enough glucose in the body that the brain can function, the body can function, but not so much that we're actually effectively killing ourselves, that it's not going to kill us. And that's why there's so much involved in it. Can't possibly go through all of it again today or on one call. It's a huge process, and it's not just sugar, there's proteins and fats and all sorts of things to take into account in this. So what we're going to do today is just focus on why the blood sugar roller coaster causes inflammation. So what do we need to know and understand about this, and what can we do to get off it, to make this not happen, so we can reduce our inflammation? So the blood sugar roller coaster is effectively when our blood sugars rise above the threshold. So you can see on this little chart here, we've got sort of normal blood sugar levels. That's this range that our bodies are happy at. If we eat something that's got a lot of sugar or that converts quickly, blood sugar levels rise, they go above the threshold, and our body produces insulin to bring it back down. So then the levels will drop, but they'll usually drop then below the actual desired threshold. So the insulin tells the body cells to take in glucose out of the blood to store it as glycogen and fat, and we end up with a low blood sugar level after this, or very quickly, because we've used it. So at this point, the body needs more. There's not enough to support our body, there's not enough for our brains. We start to feel hungry, we might feel cranky, we might feel a bit weak. We know we need sugar, and often when our blood sugar levels drop below the threshold, we'll then naturally reach for something that is more sugary. We want that immediate sugar hit because we feel like that's what our body needs. So quite often then you'll tend to eat something that then pushes your blood sugar straight above the threshold again, and we repeat, and this cycle then just keeps repeating, and you go on this throughout the day, and it's quite hard to get off it. What we want to achieve, what we want to aim for, is actually to keep our levels within this orange strip, within this bar, where we're raising the blood sugar levels slowly after a meal. We don't really go above the top level, and you get this nice, slower, gradual plateau, which it will go up and down throughout the day, obviously, but it doesn't breach these thresholds and cause stress to our bodies and cause us to store everything as fat. So what damage are we doing when we go over this level beyond keeping yourself on the roller coaster? Why is it so bad to be on this roller coaster? So we talked about how high sugar levels in the blood can cause damage to the blood vessels. So when we go above that level, we're starting to accumulate low levels of damage and strain to blood vessels. And what then happens is, as we talked about on Tuesday, when we have damage within the body, one of our reactions to make it better is for acute inflammation, for localised inflammation, to get in there to help with the healing, to help fight off anything that's going wrong. Which is fine, except if we're doing this regularly and we keep repeatedly damaging these little capillaries and blood vessels, then we keep eliciting an acute inflammation response. And as we talked about before, or in the video about inflammation, that then leads to repeated triggerings of inflammation and can lead to chronic inflammation. We'll also find that if we repeatedly release insulin a lot, so again, after a lot, most meals will end up releasing some, but if we're releasing a lot and we're doing it regularly, our cells can start to become almost bored of it. They stop listening to that cue, they habituate to it. And this is called as decreased sensitivity. And this is effectively what causes type 2 diabetes. So next time the insulin comes out, the cells basically sort of start to ignore it, and so the blood glucose levels don't drop, and they continue to rise, or they stay high, which then causes this damage that we talked about, blood vessels, and that's what can lead to the permanent damage in diabetes of long-term damage to these vessels and then to organs. So, and that damage to the blood vessels causes inflammation. And if we keep cycling this, if we keep doing this more, every time we're going up, we talked about how in between we sort of put on fat, and then that fat gets used in between meals. But if we're not using that fat in between meals, because we're almost immediately putting more sugar back in and then putting more sugar back in, and we never actually use that fat in between, we put on weight. That's what leads us to put on weight. And obesity, so fat cells cause inflammation in the body. Sugar is also processed into uric acid, which is thought to be inflammatory. So if you're eating more sugars, then you are gonna, fueling body with more of these refined sugars, you're going to have high levels of inflammation. They also produce something called AGEs, which are form when protein and fats react with the sugar in the blood. So there's a lot of sugar in the blood, you're more likely to get these AGEs produced, and that leads to oxidative stress and inflammation as well. And this was my one. Sugar feeds bad gut bacteria and candida yeast in the gut, and can actually ruin or off-balance your gut bacteria. That reduces your gut health, which then can lead to irritation and inflammation of the gut lining. That inflammation in itself, that irritation, causes inflammation. But what can then happen is that as the health of our gut lining deteriorates, we get what's called leaky gut syndrome, and these bigger food particles can get through into our bloodstream, and our bodies react to them like pathogens, like foreign invaders, and then we get inflammation every time we eat effectively, which is no good. So as I said at the start, that's just these inflammation issues of refined sugars. There's a whole load more issues to refined sugars, but we don't have time to go there. And is it just, are we just talking refined sugar? When I talk refined sugar, am I just talking boiled sweets and cakes and biscuits here? It's not really. It's what we're trying to avoid here is a blood sugar spike. So that can be caused by simple carbohydrates, so your white breads, and things like that. So that are gonna very quickly digested carbohydrates. We can also get it from our meals. So if we eat a really big meal, then as that starts to digest, it will obviously get broken down and cause a spike in blood sugar, particularly if we're not mixing it with fats and fibres to sort of slow that digestion down. And fruits and fruit juices are often quite high in sugar as well. Dried fruits, raisins, they all have a lot of sugar in them, and so actually, even though they're seen as healthy foods, you think having a glass of orange juice is very healthy. Drinking half a pint of orange juice, that's going to cause a blood sugar spike because it's so high in sugar. Eating a massive handful of raisins is going to do the same. So we need to manage our sugar levels entirely. So what can we do to avoid getting on this roller coaster? What can we do to stay in that little nice happy middle region? We can choose low sugar foods, so things that have sort of got less than 5 grams per 100 grams. So when you're looking at your food labels on the back, you can check. We can avoid sugar food as long as possible throughout the day. So the trouble with this roller coaster is once you're on it, it's very hard to get off because your body will automatically drive you towards sugary foods, and you're going to find it even harder to say no to chocolate and biscuits and things like that, or that snack in the middle of the morning when you're suddenly feeling that low at 10 or 11 because you had a bit of a sugary breakfast. It's very hard to turn those down when your body's telling you that it needs it. So try and stay off it as long as possible. For me, I kind of did this by managing to say, right, I need to go until at least lunchtime before I have some like biscuits, cakes, and that sort of thing. So I that helped me out a lot when I was first starting out with this, was just to set that rule for myself. To say I've got to go until at least lunch. If I want a biscuit today, no, just wait till after lunch, because at least then I know I've had a good breakfast, I've not done anything funny with the sugars until lunchtime, I can have a good lunch, which should keep me going, and then hopefully I won't get the cravings till about 3, and I've done most of the day off it. So do yourself a favour and just try and stay off it stay off sugar as long as possible in the day. We can try and combine sugary foods with high fat or high fibre foods to slow down our digestion. That can really help to minimise the spike. So actually things like chocolate is actually, depending on the chocolate, but if dairy milk's not so good because it's literally half sugar, but if you have some of the dark chocolates or the sort of medium chocolates, which are a bit lower in sugar, they've got quite a lot of fat in them as well, so that does slow the digestion down a little bit. We can find low sugar alternatives, so find some healthy baking. There are lots of, I know people and my family always laugh at me because I make cakes with sweet potato and courgette, biscuits with black beans in them, and they always make fun of me, but they taste like chocolate, and they don't give me a blood sugar spike, so they can laugh all they like, but I'm pretty happy because I get to eat something sweet and tasty, and I don't have to worry about my blood sugars. They may not be quite as good as like a big thick cake slice of like massive chocolatey fudge cake, but you know, I can still do that every now and then. But at least I'm not having it every day. The other thing, and really what a lot of these rules are and come down to, is following a low GL diet. So you may not have heard of this, or you may have heard of the glycemic index, which is a similar thing. GL is a bit better because it considers how much of the food you eat. So try to follow a low GL diet. High GL foods are things like sugars in your white breads and things that convert to sugar quickly in the blood. So the glycemic load, the GL, is a measure of how quickly, when you eat something, how quickly is that going to get into your bloodstream. So obviously sugar is incredibly high, whereas something like, a block of margarine, something like a block of lard or something, a big lump of fat, is incredibly low. Doesn't mean it's necessarily healthy. Low GL does not necessarily mean healthy, but it means you're balancing your blood sugars. So you can get tables and you can find, there's all sorts of stuff about this online. And obviously I can help you to implement a GL diet if you would like some guidance and some help in this. By eating low GL foods, we are basically making sure of keeping those blood spikes to a minimum and making sure that our food is doing this in between those thresholds. So the general principles are really what we talked about. They're about having low sugar, low refined carbohydrates, and trying to always add proteins and fats or fibres into our meals to slow down the digestion, because that really slows down the release of sugars into our blood. That's particularly when you're trying to have a simpler carbohydrate. So the joy of it is it doesn't ban you from having, nice treat foods. It just tries to change the way that you have them a little bit by how you combine them and the volumes that you perhaps have. So actually it can be fine to have a small piece of some things, but it's often thinking about your volume. So a couple of pieces of chocolate is probably not going to spike your blood sugar, but if you eat an entire bar, then you're going to see a spike, and that's going to cause you trouble. Okay, so that was a quick run through of blood sugar, the blood sugar roller coaster, and inflammation, and how we can try to really curb a lot of our inflammation or reduce a lot of our inflammation by following sort of GL diet principles, by reducing our sugars, reducing refined sugars, refined carbohydrates, and trying to combine things with fat and protein and follow the rules of a GL diet. So I hope that was useful, I hope it helps, and thanks for listening, and we'll speak soon.